What's going on, everybody? We are back with episode number 14 of the Club and Sub podcast. Tonight we're going to be breaking down Oleinik versus Lewis. Once again, we are without the full group as Lags is having internet issues because he's from Florida. Just kidding, but had to throw a jab in there. And then also C is not with us because he's busy at work. He swears he'll be on next week. But yeah, message C and tell him to get his shit together. So before we get started, just real quick, once again, I am wearing the Square hat, which is brought to you by squaresandSharps.com. Bunch of great merch they have for people who are into the betting industry. And Luke is wearing a shirt from them. They do a lot. They donate a portion of their profits to charities. Really cool company. Check them out, squaresandSharps.com. Luke, you want to hit them with your promo code here?
Yeah, if you guys want 15% off and free shipping on your total purchase, you can use my promo code SWR2020, as John touched on. Good company, new company, a lot of good people there. They got some solid merch, whether you're a casual bettor, hardcore bettor, MMA bettor. They even got some MMA specific merch out there. So check them out, guys. That's squaresandSharps.com. Once again, promo code SWR2020 for 15% off your whole purchase and free shipping.
All right. So real quick, before we get into this week's card, we're just going to review our bets from last week. Another great week for the pod all around, except for Lags, who was on Edmund. But so I had a couple plays. I ended up jumping on Bobby Green late last week. Got on his decision line for a unit at plus 305. And then I talked to a couple people who said they thought Green could finish late. So I added a unit and a half to a straight money line at plus 145. And basically, like I said on the pod, the reason I ended up coming around on this was that I knew Green was better. It's just really a matter of how much effort would you get from him, and we ended up getting the best version of him, and he pieced Venata up, so not totally surprised. He almost did get the finish, but it was nice to cash a plus 300 there. And and then second play I had was Randy Brown, had a unit and a half plus 160. This is just a real bad read by me, to be honest. I'm sure you guys, if you watch, know I can be a bit stat dependent at times when it comes to striking. And this was one of those cases where I let the metrics swing me a bit too hard and just kind of ignored the obvious that Luque was going to be able to just basically beat the hell out of his leg. I kind of figured he could just kind of tank that damage and would be fine. Unfortunately, it did not end up working out that way. And then Brown, just being a total dumbass, trying to get his hand on the canvas to let that knee be illegal, got himself finished. And then last bet of the night was a unit on Derek Brunson plus 250. Easy to say in hindsight, but I kind of wish I had gone heavier on this. If you heard our breakdown, both Luke and I were kind of of the same mind last week that this was, there was a lot of reason to think that Edmund was not legit, just based on the tape and then based on the lack of stuff we'd seen in the tape. And we basically saw it come to fruition. He couldn't defend takedowns. He gave his back every time he got taken down. And this time, even though he didn't attempt 14 takedowns, he still gassed out pretty hard. His striking looked good, but it seems like he throws every shot 100%, and it just gassed him even faster. So, he's still young. Kid could bounce back for sure. Wouldn't shock me. But, he obviously wasn't ready for this step up in competition, and I kind of hope they give him a couple fights against unranked opponents before having him test the waters of the high end of the division again. Luke, how are you?
So another good week on a nice little 3-event winning streak back again. You kind of touched on the Brunson fight. I played him for one unit at plus 300. I'm not going to shit on Shabazian. I do still think the kid has some potential, but this is one of those spots where I think Brunson posed a tough stylistic matchup for him. He's a veteran. He's fought some of the better guys. And the line just really didn't make sense to me at all. I'm not usually a guy to play like these really long shot type dogs. I think this is probably actually the biggest dog I've played of 2020 so far, and it ended up coming through. But, it's just all about finding those spots, those different stylistic matchups. And I think Brunson was a bad one for him, but we'll see how Edmund rebounds. I had 1.5 units on Frankie Saenz at plus 188. Pretty bad read here. I guess my big thing was I was just assuming that Frankie wasn't shot. I also bet Benavidez the other week too. So, it hasn't been good for the past few weeks in terms of betting on some older fighters with some durability issues. I thought Saenz was going to be able to get in on the wrestling a little bit more, but to Martinez's credit, he kicked really well. He threw those knees up the middle to kind of discourage the takedowns of Sainz. I thought Sainz would be able to mix it up on the feet a little bit more, but Martinez kind of just blew him out of the water. So it was a bad bet, but it's kind of one of those scenarios where I still am pretty firm in not playing the shot or not narrative. I just like to look at the tape in the stylistic matchup at hand, but this is one of those cases where, you know, the durability really proved to be one of the bigger differences of the fight. So lost a unit and a half there. And then my third and final bet, I had 2 units on Luque and Brown over 1.5 rounds at -160. Definitely a little bit more action earlier on than I was thinking. They were trading a little bit more. I thought Brown would be able to utilize kind of that outside game a little bit better early, at least for maybe that first like 3, 4, 5 minutes of the fight, and then maybe it would start to pick up. But there was definitely some exchanges there, but so not the greatest bet in the world, but I'm glad it cashed, especially after losing the over on Trinaldo by a minute the other week. So I think that's just a little bit of good karma on my part. But so yeah, I rounded out the night plus 2.75 units profit, but I also did have 4 bets on this card that got canceled. I had 4 units on Chris Gutierrez over Luke Sanders, so I was pretty heavy on him. Pretty mad that fell out. I was very heavy on Ray Borg, and given how we saw the matchup in that fight, Ray Borg I think would have absolutely mopped the floor with him. So I'm pretty confident that one would have cashed. I also had a dog play on Ed Herman. Obviously that fell out, and then I was pretty heavy on Kevin Holland as well. So who knows? Maybe that was actually good that one fell out, and I would have looked like an ass.
I don't want any of the same bets as you anymore, Luke. There's like a coin flip that I'm just going to lose them before the fight.
So yeah, four bets canceled. That brings it to a record of 19 bets canceled on the year of 2020. So not saying I would have won all of those 19 bets by any means, but I am a little curious to see if my year could be a little bit better if some of those bets weren't canceled, and a little bit of time saved on my part too, which would be nice.
35 hours of work.
Yeah, probably more than that, to be honest. Coupled with some of the write-ups and whatnot I'm doing too. So all those kind of went out the window. But nonetheless, yeah, it brings it to 3 straight winning events. Started the year, I was in about like a 10-unit hole at one point in the year. Now I'm up to about a 10-unit profit. So, you know, just stay the course. There's peaks and valleys in this game. Yep. Keep going, stick with the strategy. And yeah, so cash a nice 2.75 units, looking to keep it going this weekend.
How'd you do, Quinn?
So I just had the half unit on Brunson at plus 287, and I can't like take full credit for that. I kind of tailed you guys, and I had multiple people sway me on it. I had said all week that if he had hit plus 300 that I was going to play him just based purely off the value side. Like I still think that Edman is a fantastic prospect. I just think that they threw him to the wolves a little bit too soon. And so I thought he did a really good job though, Brunson. I mean, he did what he had to do to get the win, you know, and it's a solid win for him, and I'm excited for it because he's going to get like a good fight next. So like probably one of the bigger fights of his career now that he's on like a little win streak. So that was really nice to see him get the win. And I was kind of trying to hold out for the plus 300, but like it was like 2 hours before fight time, and I was like, man, I need to track this before they close it. So I ended up getting plus 287, which I was pretty happy about. I mean, it was definitely a solid play. Probably the best bet on the night, in my opinion, next to green was the Brunson play for sure. So I'm just glad that we all cashed, and whoever tailed the pot on it. I mean, good job. I'm glad you guys cashed too. This week is a lot better. I wasn't really that stoked on the card from a betting perspective, like in general last week at all. So, but I got multiple plays this week, so we'll be getting it back.
Yeah. It really fucking pisses me off, to be honest, that Brunson went to plus 300, to be honest. Like, I picked it up plus 250 earlier in the week, and I was like, people are going to watch Stewart fight and they're going to hit Brunson. And then it just kept going up. And at that point I was like, I have a unit here. I don't really want to increase my exposure too much to this. But yeah, so good job, everybody. DJ Debo. Yeah. Well, I'll have a 9-to-5 job as of Monday. I got laid off during COVID, and yeah, everybody else on the pod has a 9 to 5
Yep, we work full time.
or in Quinn's case, 12-hour a day job. So anyway, we're going to this week. Fun little week here. It's UFC Fight Night, Lewis versus Oleinik. A lot of interesting spots. I have a bunch of bets here. I think Luke does as well. I think Quinn does too. I think it's another decent card for dogs. I'm mostly on them this week. So we'll jump right into it. Irwin Rivera, Ali, how do we pronounce this? Kasi?
Casey.
Yeah. So, Luke, you want to start with this? Because I haven't done too much research on this fight, to be honest.
Yeah, I actually, this is the one fight of the card I actually passed over just because I couldn't find the 4 most recent fights on what do you say? Is that a tattoo where you need parental consent? People, Sun Tzu taking shots again.
I have lots of tattoos.
No, but yeah, I passed over this one just because I couldn't find the 4 most recent fights on Casey. And, you know, if there's a guy who's coming in making his debut, a guy I don't know too much about, I really want those most recent fights available to really accurately assess where the guy's truly at right now. If not, then I'm kind of going back a little too much, and I think I'm making too many assumptions. So I try not to pass over fights, but this is kind of one of those situations where I did. But I'm a big proponent of the Extreme Couture gym. My boy Eric Nixick out there, Al Casey's been working out there, getting in some good work. Just in the little bit I did see in some of his later fights, it looks like the dude does have some promise, but didn't really look into Rivera much. So I don't have analysis. I'll pass it to you guys.
Yeah, Quinn, how about you?
Yeah, I like Al Casey here. I like Luke said, I'm not playing him. Like, I mean, maybe if I have a few more whiskeys later in the night, I might play him. But yeah, I like his game from what I've seen. I mean, he doesn't really have any striking, but he's very big. He's very muscular. He's strong in the clinch. He has a really solid body lock, and he has really nice outside trips. And from what I've seen on the regional scene with Rivera, is he's really not that great off of his back at all. He gets his guard passed way too easily, and he just doesn't really defend takedowns that well. So, you know, if he can't get back up consistently, like I do see Al Casey being able to land takedowns here. I mean, he's going to be a good amount sized bigger than Rivera here. I mean, you know, and on the flip side, you know, if he can get back up, like I watched like 4 of Al Casey's fights, and I think he threw like 5 significant strikes total in all 4 of those fights. Like the dude just doesn't strike at all. So on the feet, you know, like Rivera was pretty low volume against Giga, but like on his regional fights, he definitely let his hands go. So I do think he probably pieces Al Casey up on the feet. But personally, I like betting fighters that can dictate where the fight goes, and for me, that's Al Casey here. I do think that it goes to a decision. So I think you could probably, if you do like Al Casey, you could play him by decision at plus 300, or just hit his money line. I think he's plus 165 now. But yeah, I'm just really not that high on Rivera in general at all. But yeah, we just don't know much about like both fighters really. I mean, you know, this is Rivera's second fight. This is Al Casey's UFC debut, and 70% of fighters losing their debut. So it's just like Luke said, it's just kind of a pass fight in general. I mean, maybe if you want to bet it, like look to bet it live. But yeah, for a pick, I'm definitely going with Al Casey by decision.
And real quick too, Quinn. I like I said, I didn't do a whole lot of tape in this fight, but I think unless I'm mixing him up with somebody, I felt like I read he was a Sanda world champion though. Yeah, so when in terms of like analysis that the guy doesn't like strike much, that's kind of weird, right?
Yeah, like it was really weird. He didn't strike at all, like in all of his fights. Like he would just kind of like waited, and then he grabbed the body lock.
Yeah, because like some of the most like notable Sanda guys, I guess.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Quinn.
Like I didn't watch his Brave fights. Like I wasn't able to find them. So that might be, you know, he might have striked in there, but like from the old tape that I watched, like he hardly did any striking at all. He just landed takedowns consistently, and you know he definitely subbed a few guys with that tight guillotine that he has. So he has a solid guillotine, but from what I saw, he really hardly has any striking at all. I did go up and watch his Instagram, and it looks like he's definitely been putting in work with it. So I hope that we do see it here, but from what I saw on tape, he's primarily a grappler.
Yeah. So I basically kind of come down similar to where Luke did here. I couldn't find his last 4 fights. Level of competition's pretty low. So it's like, it's one of those things. It's like, I don't really know how to rate his wrestling when he's fighting mostly bums. Like, it's just, it's kind of how I felt about Cody Durden last week. I had a feeling that Durden might be value, but again, rating wrestling against guys who can't defend takedowns is kind of hard to do. So he seems okay. Regarding Rivera, I don't think Rivera is very good, to be honest. I think he's probably getting a little too much credit for not dying in the octagon against Giga. But yeah, I mean, I guess gun to my head, I'd go with Casey, since I don't think either of them are really, UFC level, to be honest. I just, like I said, I didn't go too deep because if I couldn't find his most recent fights, I just didn't want to waste my time. So yeah, none of us have plays, but my pick's going to be Casey as well. We move on. We got Peter Barrett, Yusuf Zalal. Fun fact, this replaced Peter Barrett, Steven Garcia, where C actually had a max bet on Steven Garcia here originally. Said it was, quote, the lock of the year. I am not kidding you. So, yeah, pretty much I actually did look into this a bit. Peter Barrett's really bad, to be honest with you. He's a bit of a grinder, but the thing is he has no striking defense at all. His striking offense isn't anything to write home about. Pretty much for him to win fights at this level, he has to be able to grind you to the fence and kind of just get clinch time, land takedowns, and try as hard as to control position. It's going to be pretty tough in this spot. I like Zalal a decent bit. I don't really know what his ceiling is. He's really young, but, I like his length. I played him against Jordan Griffin. He's a good wrestler, decent submission grappler. He really should have Barrett covered everywhere here, and the line reflects that. I mean, he's currently minus 430. The one concern is we've seen Zalal get grinded a few times regionally, and that's a concern for me. And so, consequently, I wouldn't say there's necessarily value on Barrett or enough to play it, because I do think if Zalal just decides, okay, I'm going to go out there, take him down, and submit him, he probably can, but I just wouldn't want any part of Zalal prop or otherwise here. I do think, that would be Barrett's path to victory. And because Zalal is still very, very, very green, I can't rule it out. It's one of those fights where it's I expect Zalal to wash him out. But if Barrett can, maybe he can just push him up against the fence and just get a ton of fence time. So, yeah, it's just not for me here. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, so cheap plug. This is my first fight in my 3 Not For Me article over at MMA Odds Breaker. Check it out. I want no part of this fight from a betting perspective. I'm not a big prop guy, so I largely look at straights and totals. Obviously, Zalal sitting as chalky of a price as he is. I think he's a decent fighter, but definitely not a guy I would really recommend laying minus 450 against pretty much anybody, to be completely honest. And then, as you touched on, to be honest, I don't think Peter Barrett is UFC caliber at all. And really where I actually see Zalal having success in this fight, well, it's pretty much anywhere. Cause I do think he's better than Barrett everywhere, but I think the path to least resistance is actually in the grappling, just because Peter Barrett has essentially no takedown defense. I've seen his guard pass very easily. I've seen him give his back up multiple times. And, I'm not saying Zalal's this world-class BJJ guy, but I think his jiu-jitsu's serviceable. I think he's a purple belt, but don't quote me on that. And the thing with Zalal is, he doesn't have a ton of finishing potential, and he'll kind of play that outside range game. So he could definitely just outpoint Barrett on the feet. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. And it's actually probably pretty probable. To me, this fight really just comes down to how Zalal wants to approach it. Because I do think if he decides to stand with him for 15 minutes, he probably wins on points that way. But I think that's also giving Peter Barrett kind of that chance he needs to make it a little bit more grittier and closer than it should be. But honestly, I think Zalal should just go wrestle heavy here and try to take him down and take his back. And I think he gets a sub. I think Zalal by submission is plus 250. I'm not a big prop guy, as I touched on, but I think if you're betting this fight, I actually think Zalal by sub is probably the play here. But once again, we just don't know how Zalal is going to approach the fight. So I'd say proceed the bet with caution, but I wouldn't touch either guy straight.
Yeah, I agree. Luke. Quinn, do you have any different take on this, or?
No, not at all. I don't want any part of this fight. I don't know. I don't understand. Like, don't put Zalal in these parlays at a minus 500 favorite. Like, that's just not a smart idea. And I looked in this fight a little bit like you guys said. Like, Barrett's really, he shouldn't be in the UFC. He shouldn't be anywhere near the UFC. The guy has so much shit that he needs to work on. And I'm not too high on Zalal. Like, I think I was like one of the only ones on the pod that actually like took Griffin as his pick versus him. Boy, was I wrong on that one. But yeah, I totally agree with Luke. I think that if Zalal wants to make this an easy fight, he can just grind him on the mat, take him down, and submit him here. So I am yeah, and right now Zalal by submission is plus 310, which that's not bad if you want to put like half a unit, a quarter unit on that. But for me, it's just a pass. There's just way better opportunities on this card. So just pass, save your money on this. But Zalal's gonna roll probably by sub.
Yeah, agreed. And Barrett's not even very young, to be honest. He's 33. Fun little fact for you guys: 5 fights ago. This is 2017 or 2018, actually. He fought a guy who was 15 and 75. That's at
yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
he fought a dude who was 15 and 75.
Anyway, he looked like a superstar too.
Yeah. We move on. Fun one. Luke, I think you have a play here. We got Gavin Tucker, Justin James. This actually opened. I think it opened like Tucker about minus 210. It's down to Tucker minus 120, James plus 100. What do you got, Luke?
Yeah, so this is probably one of my stronger opinions on the card. We'll get into another one later that I know we all have a strong opinion on too. But I mean, I think there's a decent amount to unpack here. I'll try to keep it brief. But ultimately, I just think there's a lot of recency bias on this fight in terms of the line. We saw James come in on short notice and knock out Frank Camacho. And then, we saw, or I shouldn't say we saw, but we've seen Gavin Tucker be relatively inactive throughout the course of his career. And I think really what's influencing this line, I guess I'll first preface by saying I think the opening line was roughly correct. I think the odds makers actually got it right. And I think the public's pretty wrong here. So largely my reasoning is I think outside of the recency bias in terms of James, I think people are really looking into that Rick Glenn fight, Gavin Tucker fight way too heavily. And I say that for a few reasons. One, I think that's the best Rick Glenn we've ever seen in the UFC. Two, Rick Glenn is a massive 145er. And three, I mean, Gavin Tucker self-admittedly said he had an absolutely terrible weight cut for that fight. He just wasn't in shape. He completely blew his wad. And actually, I think in the first round before getting dropped, I don't think Gavin Tucker looked that bad in the fight, but it was just really all downhill after he got dropped and completely gassed. And then Glenn obviously put a beating on him for the rest of the fight. But really, I guess the crux of why I'm making this big bet, I got 3 units on Gavin Tucker at minus 120, is that I think the guy's relatively underrated. I think his footwork is good. I think his striking is good. If you go back and watch that Sam Sicilia fight, the guy looked absolutely phenomenal. And you can say what you want about Sam Sicilia and whatnot, but I think he looked solid in that fight. And then even in his most recent one against Choi, and I even touched on it in terms of Glenn, in terms of size, he's fighting another guy in Choi who had, I think, about 4 inches of height and 6 inches of reach on him. So he's fighting 2 really massive 145ers back to back. And I think really in that fight, he showed excellent fight IQ. He listened to Faraz. He's a TriStar guy, at least originally. I know he was actually looking to move down to Extreme Couture before this. I'm not 100% sure where he's at, but getting back to it, I think he just showed really good fight IQ in that fight. And, I didn't think he looked bad on the feet, but he really executed on the wrestling game plan, which is what ultimately beat Choi and ended up getting that submission victory. James is a collegiate wrestler who's got some power, but if you actually go back and watch some of his regional fights, the dude's fighting in one of those like super small regional cages, which I think 100% favors a guy like Justin James, also fighting relatively spotty competition. Dude's fought all the way up at 175 pounds, 155 pounds. The dude's fighting at, I don't know if this is his first fight at 145, but I think it's one of the first ones. I know it is in the UFC. But I honestly, I just think Tucker's Tucker's better everywhere. You know, James has a BJJ brown belt. Tucker's a black belt. James obviously, like I said, has that collegiate wrestling in his back pocket, but it seems like he's been a little bit more open to it, to striking a little bit more. So I'm curious to see how James approaches it. But even if James is able to land takedowns in the spot, Gavin's pretty scrambly off his back. And it's another one of these situations where I think people are looking too heavily into that Rick Glenn fight. Like, oh, well, how did Gavin look on his back in the Rick Glenn fight? It's like, to me, that fight was a complete anomaly. That was his first pro loss. I think he handled it well. And if you actually look at it, that was in Canada. He went back in the same exact building 2 years from then and looked pretty solid against Choi. I think it was one of those fights where it's a solid learning experience for the guy. Like, everyone's first O has to go at some point, and I think he's made the proper adjustments. I think he's the better fighter here. I think the public is massively wrong in this spot. People are looking at the inactivity too much, the injuries too much, and the bets are just too narrative based on James, in my opinion. Like, if you bet James at like plus 170 or whatnot, I don't hate that at all. But with where the line is, I think it's absolutely ridiculous and very disrespectful to Gavin Tucker, just because I think his skill set is so much better. So, the guy's only 34, so he's getting up there. But, like I said, I just think he's the better fighter. So, outside of James finishing a bunch of bums on the regional scene, getting a quick flash KO over a guy who's relatively chinny, the guy's going to have to prove a lot more to me in that. So you're going to give me minus 120 on a little bit more proven guy, a little bit more battle tested, in my opinion, despite the amount of fights. I'm taking Gavin Tucker all day.
Quinn, how about you?
Yeah. I originally, I had talked to you guys, in the beginning of the week, I was pre-tape, I was pretty confident in Tucker. And I still think he definitely wins. And the line movement, it's just been so weird. It goes from minus 210 to all the way down to minus 120. Is there something that someone knows that we don't know? I have no idea. It's like the line movement is just kind of scared me away. But skill for skill, I do think that Tucker is much better than James. On the feet, he's a lot more technical with his striking. I don't really like how he moves back. If James is going to pressure him, I don't know how he's going to do with that. And he's pretty hittable in general, which is another thing that kind of put me off from him. But I do think that he is the better grappler here. I mean, I know he spent some time at I think he trains at TriStar now, doesn't he? I know he got his what?
He's at Halifax, so I assume
he was at TriStar for his last camp,
I think, and I think he got his black belt from there, and he's taken quite a bit of time off in between both of his fights to really hone his skill set. And I was on his Instagram yesterday, and he looks like a tank for this fight. He looks big, he looks good to go. I think James is pretty unproven. I was pretty heavy on Camacho versus him, and James kind of did what he had to do. His really only path to victory was walk him down and just throw bombs. And I do think he could, he has a potential to catch Tucker here, but really, how high can you cap that? And I just think that James is still pretty unproven here. I just wasn't impressed with his regional tape at all. So yeah, I think Tucker is gonna take it here, either win a unanimous decision or possibly get him down and sub him here. But we also we don't really know what James's gas tank is like either. We don't really know. And based off of one UFC fight, and like you said, Luke, he fought complete bums on the regional scene. I don't even remember what regional promotion it was, but I had never
WXC.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not in the business at all of playing James here. I think, and so the value is 100% on Tucker. But I think there's better spots in my opinion for me. But the pick here is definitely going to be Tucker. I do definitely don't hate your bet at all.
Yeah. I taped it. I thought about stabbing James at plus 190. I didn't. The line then came way in. Would have been a real.
I wouldn't have hated that bet, John.
The problem is it's kind of to your points about James, and I said this earlier with regard to Al-Qaisi. It's just I look at his regional tape, and it's not overly impressive. His wrestling seems, it seems solid enough. But again, until like 3 fights ago, all of these guys he was mauling and killing were absolute cans. Like the only decent fighter he fought before his last regional fight was Troy Lamson. And he got taken down. And Lamson's like not even particularly good, but he's a competent, like high level regional fighter, But he got taken down by Lamson and he gave him his back right away to get up. And it's like, I can see the angle where he stuffs, Tucker's grappling attempts and maybe lands the bigger shots or stays near on volume, wins a close decision or knocks him out. The problem is I don't have a good enough grasp of his grappling here. And if he gets taken down by Gavin Tucker and gives his back there, he's going to be in a world of trouble. Mm-hmm. And even beyond that, kind of touching on Tucker, like, you touched on, I agree the Glenn fight's a bit overrated. I still don't know what to make of Tucker. I said in our group chat last night, his movement in that first fight against Cecilia was like, it looked like Dominic Cruz. Like, that's like what it looked like. And then with Glenn, he's basically, I don't know if he just got in his own head or whatever, but he's basically standing in front of Rick Glenn and deciding he's going to go to war with a much bigger, longer fighter. And then last fight against Choi, obviously he won that fight, looked pretty good doing it. But, again, it was a very grindy type fight. We haven't seen him really go back to deploying that movement-based stand-up. And it's one of those things, like, I think James is a bit slow. I think he's kind of plodding. Yeah. And I kind of think, if Tucker did that, Tucker could pretty much outpoint him. And so, ultimately, like, I just don't have a very good read on it. I
question James's gas tank. Heavy.
Yeah.
No one's really pushed him, to be honest.
No one's pushed him.
Well, okay. It's worth saying maybe he has a bad gas tank, except until we see him gas, I can't say I question his gas tank, to be honest. I just can't really factor that in. I can factor it in when I'm trying to think about whether to bet him. But, yeah, the range of outcomes here, you could convince me Tucker looks minus 300 here, and I believe you after the fight. And you could convince me James looks minus 150. And so it's a no play for me. I don't mind the Tucker play where you got it, Luke. I don't mind the James play where Lags got it, which is plus 138. But yeah, so we move on, and this is a fun one. And I think we all have plays on it. Luke, I think you have the biggest one. So I'll start with you. We got Andrew Sanchez, Wellington Turman. Sanchez currently plus 135, Turman minus 155.
Yep. So I put 2 units on Andrew Sanchez at plus 148. Got in, I think, about last week or so. Ultimately, I know we all have a lot to talk about here, so I'll keep it brief. But I just think Andrew Sanchez is a pretty bad style matchup for Wellington Turman. Ultimately, he's a guy who I just think is relatively overrated in terms of his skill set. I think his striking is actually relatively basic. He's the guy who really relies on pressure and then his grappling as well. He's a BJJ black belt, but I don't think his wrestling is particularly great. And then just touching on Sanchez real quick too, he really made that move to TriStar back in 2018. And I think it was really a good one for him. It seems like, I'm not saying we've seen like these crazy strides in Andrew Sanchez's game, but I think we have seen improvements. And I think right now we're seeing the best Andrew Sanchez. And really the crux of why I made this bet was the fact that I think he's, in terms of Turman, is he's never really fought a guy who's got that really grinding type style that Andrew Sanchez has, who's also competent in the boxing. Like, Andrew Sanchez is a black belt and a collegiate All-American wrestler, but I think his boxing has really improved. And I think this is what a lot of people mix up in terms of assessing fights and handicapping fights. It's like, just because some guy is a strong wrestler, has a BJJ background, that means that he also needs to have like this diverse striking game to also be successful. And I'll be the first one to say Andrew Sanchez doesn't, but that's fine, because in terms of his striking, it works for his style. Like, he's not going to throw a bunch of flashy stuff. He's not going to throw a bunch of high output stuff, but he's got a good jab, a good 1-2, good hooks. He's a serviceable fighter with solid boxing who can do what he needs to do on the feet to ultimately close distance. So really in this fight, we've just really never seen Turman pressured that much. And I just want to touch on the Roberson fight real quick. Carl Roberson got 3 minutes of top time in the first round and also was able to reverse position from back take and mount twice in that fight. Carl Roberson has essentially no grappling or whatever. And I know I've heard some narrative too that, Turman took that fight on short notice. It's like, Okay, but he still got controlled in the grappling by, on paper, a far inferior grappler in Carl Roberson for 3 minutes. And then later in the fight also got reversed, as I touched on, in terms of position as well. So to me, I question his jiu-jitsu credentials, because he actually had Roberson's back for a decent amount of time, and I believe either the second or third round.
His ankles when he gets on people's backs.
Yeah, and he couldn't finish him. And a real quick point too. I mean, if we're talking about, like, once again, if you want to play the whole short notice narrative, last time I checked, Marvin Vettori, who's not a high level black belt on paper, came in here and submitted Carl Roberson relatively easily. So, dude, Sanchez at plus 148, like, I understand there's some gas tank issues and whatnot, but I think on the feet, he can definitely make this competitive, if not win. But then again, in this betting game, it's styles make matchups and fights. And, I just don't think Andrew Sanchez is a good matchup for Wellington Turman, unless we see like these massive improvements from Turman and my bet falls on its face. I guess I'm fine with that. But I think we're seeing the best Andrew Sanchez right now, and Turman's got a lot of question marks on him, and it's just a bad style matchup. So I'm willing to take a decent dog shot for 2 units at plus 148 on Andrew Sanchez all day.
Yeah, great. Quinn, what do you got?
Yeah, I completely agree with Luke here. I remember looking at the line in the beginning of the week, and I was like, why the fuck is Sanchez a dog here? Like, I don't understand this. And then I taped it, and I instantly played him. I put 1 unit on him at a plus 135, and then I also put half a unit on him at plus 215. So for my breakdown, like, let's start with Sanchez. I mean, he is, in my opinion, the much better striker than Turman. I mean, the numbers say it, like he lands almost double the significant strikes as Turman does. He's way more accurate with the shots. His boxing has gotten so much better over the past few years, and he mixes in his wrestling like really, really well. Like, positionally up against the cage, he is absolutely fantastic. His head positioning is great. I love his game. I love his takedowns. He has good top control. I just really struggle to see like where Turman is better here. Like Turman uses his striking strictly to get into the clinch, and I don't see any way that he's going to be out wrestling Sanchez here. Like, Sanchez is a very, very strong wrestler, and I just think Turman's wrestling game is pretty overrated here. And against Marcus Perez, like, they both have a common opponent. Perez actually reversed Turman up against the cage like multiple times and was landing some pretty heavy shots on him, and made that fight kind of close. And when Sanchez fought Perez, he dominated him up against the cage in the clinch exchanges. Like, he won every single second of it. So I really just struggle to see like how he wins here. Like, I think that Sanchez can definitely outpoint him on the feet. I think his boxing is much better, much better than Turman's. And there's these narratives about his cardio issues. I personally don't like. He might have cardio issues, but I think it's more of like a pacing issue. Like, if you go look at the James fight and all of his fights on The Ultimate Fighter, he was just blowing his load. Like, he 10-8'd James in the first round and was just throwing bombs, trying to take his head off. And then, he ended up getting finished in the third round because of it. And then, he went to TriStar. He took some time off. He really got his skills a lot better, and you can see his performance improvements. I mean, he really has improved his pacing game here, and I just don't see how Turman is going to win here. And like, on the ground, like Luke said, Roberson is not a good grappler, and he had a lot of success in top control against Turman. And Turman's a guard player. He likes to play guard. He's not one to grab the underhook and get back up. Like, he doesn't really do that. He trusts his jiu-jitsu. And I'm sorry, like, you can't cap him guard subbing Sanchez at a very high clip. Like unless he's completely gassed, like, I just don't see that happening. I mean, Sanchez is a pretty good black belt himself here. So like, I just struggle to see.
Sanchez a black belt?
Yeah, he's a black belt. I just struggle to see where Turman wins, and like you're giving me a 38% probability on a fight that goes to a decision, like over Turman's money line at a 60% probability. Like all the value here is on Sanchez. Like I just don't really see the Turman love this week at all. And there's so many people confident in him, and I think Sanchez rolls here to a unanimous decision. So I'm pretty confident, and I was pretty happy to lay the money down on him. So.
Yeah, so I also played Sanchez. I got a unit of +145. If the money comes in on Turman, I might put more down. So basically, I'm going to try to not do too much overlap here because you guys pretty much nailed a lot of this on the head. But first of all, like Quinn touched on it a bit about what are the chances he guard subs him. Well, Turman has 2 guard subs in his whole career, and they're both guillotines. I don't think he's guillotining Sanchez. Sanchez is way too disciplined with his wrestling to do that. If you actually watch Turman on his back, I wouldn't even classify him as like a classic guard player. Like, he's not spinning really for arm bars or attacking serious triangles or anything like that. He basically kind of just gets stuck on his back. And so, like, I don't think Sanchez, like, there are some black belts who, like, if Sanchez fought them, like, I'd be like, okay, I really don't want him to go to the ground here. But honestly, I think he can pretty much go to take this to the ground with impunity and kind of hold Turman there. Like you both touched on Roberson. Roberson held Wellington Turman down for 7 minutes. Got 7 minutes top time. Roberson is one of the worst grapplers in the middleweight division. Like I like Marvin Vettori. I think most people like Marvin Vettori. Vettori's like maybe a slightly above average grappler at middleweight. He's not anything elite, and he made Roberson look like a white belt who was rolling for the first time. And that guy held him down for 7 minutes. The other thing is, I just think Sanchez largely is a bit underrated because of just like a couple incidents. Like obviously the James fight gas, and Quinn, you touched on this. But if you look at that, he's 1-1 with Marc-Andre Barrios. And Barrios, it's like pretty serious pressure. Like that guy will put a pace on you, and he was trying to at the end of round 2 with Sanchez. Sanchez comes out there, grinds him out, and basically grapples him for the entire 3rd round to win that. Perez fight was pretty close going into round 3. Same deal. And like, look, he's not as fresh in round 3 as he is in round 1 or 2. Like that's but he's not like dying of cardio death either. Ryan James, he was throwing everything into every single shot trying to get him out of there. And, basically it was the mistake of someone who's fairly new to the UFC, trying to get him out of there and not leaving anything for the way back, like in rounds 2 and 3. Now, don't get me wrong. I do think there's a scenario where maybe this is super grapple heavy because Turman does like to push the clinch a lot and Sanchez slows down or gasses. I don't think that's out of the question at all. But again, like even in the clinch, if you look at the clinch game, Sanchez is so good at reversing position there and then holding the clinch and landing takedowns in there. I just can't rate Turman as a better even almost as a better grappler. And standing, like I don't think it's even, but I think it's pretty close to even. The thing is, Turman got outlanded at distance by Marcus Perez. Like Marcus Perez doesn't outland anybody at distance. Like that's really like a bad look. He's got a 43% striking defense, and it's like I do think he hits harder. He throws like pretty straight shots, but I don't think he only has 2 KOs in his entire career to date, and that includes a bunch of fights against clowns on the Brazilian regional scene. So like the idea that he's just going to blast Sanchez just doesn't really make a ton of sense to me, especially given some of the monsters Sanchez has fought and not gotten KO'd by. And so, yeah, it's like, I think optimistically looking at it from Turman's side, you could cap it as at evens, relying on Turman to push a heavy enough grappling pace that he slows down. But from a skill perspective, I don't see how you give Turman an edge really anywhere except maybe pure jiu-jitsu. But as I mentioned, even there, if Turman ends up on his back, I don't really think he has much for Sanchez in that area. Again, Luke, to your point, Turman's a young kid. It's possible he very much outperforms his tape, and we look like ass clowns come Saturday night. That could very, very well happen. I just, maybe I'm wrong, but I just can't. When looking at this, I just can't see where Turman really has him covered at all in this fight.
Sanchez also has 100% takedown defense. Like he's never been.
He does, but I also looked into that a bit. He's only faced like 5 takedown attempts in the UFC, so it's kind of, it's a good nice stat, it's a nifty stat, but it doesn't tell us a whole lot. But yeah, so I have a unit on Sanchez +145. I think it's going to be a good fight. Anyway, we move on to another fight where I have a play. We got Alex Munoz, Nasrat Hackpress. I actually have a play on Munoz for a unit at plus 215. It's not so much of a play that I'm super confident in Munoz, so much as it's a kind of a fade on what we've seen from Hackpress skills. Now, keep in mind this fight was a couple of years ago, but if you actually look at the one fight where Nasrat actually ended up on his back, it was against Marcin Held, and Nasrat didn't get up any of the times he was there. Literally, not once. Didn't work for an underhook. Basically just closed his guard and tried to get stand-ups when Held was on top of him. Now, look, he's been training at TriStar for a few years now, and it's possible he's a young kid that he made those adjustments, but it was a real ugly look, and we haven't seen him on his back since then. And so there'd have to be a lot of improvements that would need to be made to make me think, he can get taken down and just pop back up. In his takedown defense, he's got a nice sprawl. It's good reactive takedown. But when he gets put on the fence, he doesn't seem to know how to fight chain wrestling. Like Marcin Held was ankle picking him real easy on the fence. It was kind of another really rough look. And so, again, it's like, okay, if he gets put in that situation here, I think he could be in trouble. And you look at Alex Munoz, and Munoz, very limited tape. He might not be UFC worthy. His most notable win is against a handicap person on a Contender Series. But he's the wrestling coach at Team Alpha Male, I believe. His wrestling, when he's flashed, has looked legit. He's got good entries. He can chain wrestle. He's definitely a better wrestler than Nasrat. So I'm inclined to think, he's going to get opportunities to put Nasrat down here, and he probably will put him down a couple times. And so it really becomes, did Nasrat make those improvements that we have yet to see on tape? If he has, then things could get pretty dicey for Munoz. But if he hasn't, he's going to look like an underdog, not a minus 250, 260 favorite. And then the last thing here is just I think Munoz is an okay striker. He's not as output heavy as Nasrat, doesn't throw as hard. But something I noticed when I was taping Nasrat, and I had bet Dober when he fought him, and I had kind of chalked the knockout up to being pretty random. But as I was taping it, I kept noticing Nasrat drops his right hand just about every time he throws the left. And so that shot Dober caught him with, that's there over, especially to a lefty, the straight two, is there basically every time Nasrat throws that lead left hook. And, Munoz actually is a southpaw, and he throws, a pretty decent straight left. Now, I'm not saying he'll knock him out, but it is something worth considering. So, yeah, I played Munoz for a unit. Again, not super confident, but I am willing to kind of pay up to see whether or not Nasrat's improved grappling here. Luke, how about you?
So this is my second fight in my 3-0 for me. One that I do not want a part of. I don't hate the play, John. Definitely from a straight perspective. If you're betting this fight, I definitely agree that Munoz is probably the side. But it's another one of these situations where I don't know if I just have glaring flashbacks of Max Roshkov, not like a 100% apples to apples comparison, but I mean, it's a guy who's got 6 pro fights, really hasn't been active over the course of his career. Honestly, I wasn't able to even find really his wrestling credentials. Obviously he's credentialed to be the head wrestling coach at Team Alpha Male. So I'm not questioning that, but the level of competition he's fought has just been somewhat spotty. And I know you referenced the Held fight. And once again, it was 3 years ago. And I believe that was Hackpress debut too. And I think a fun little stat in that fight too, obviously it didn't really matter much, but he actually stuffed 7 of 10 takedowns from Held. Obviously once Held got him there, it didn't really matter much because he wasn't able to get up. But so it's just really one of those situations where I'm trying to figure out, can Munoz take him down with consistency and hold him down to win minutes here? Because on the feet, as you touched on, John, I think his striking, I would put in the serviceable category. But Hackpress is just much, much better on the feet. I think the kid has a ton of upside. I as you touched on in terms of tape, I don't think you can sit there and say that and assume that the guy's made these massive takedown improvements, because I think the most takedowns he's faced from that fight, I think, was 4 from Jacasey, but he never really went super wrestle heavy, and Jacasey's not a strong wrestler. So I definitely get the narrative. I get the bet. So I guess maybe I'm kind of going out on a limb in terms of my pick, but I just kind of think Hackpress lights him up on the feet, but I could definitely be wrong. It's just a fight I don't really want any part of. I kind of want to sit back and assess Munoz's game, essentially.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Quinn, how about you? Any thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I'm gonna live bet this one. Like I could only really find like a couple of Munoz's fights, and like I just don't like laying down money on something that like I'm not super confident in. Like I liked Munoz's tape. Like he had, like you said, he has a good left hand. He has good leg kicks. He has pretty good movement on the feet. He has very, very good wrestling. But like Nasrat, he's, in my opinion, like he's a fantastic striker, like absolutely phenomenal striker. And I really don't think that the loss to Drew Dober is like horrible. Like Drew Dober is a really, really solid fighter. Like he's very, very underrated in my opinion by a lot of people. So I really don't think that is a bad loss for Nasrat. And I think this is a pretty good spot for him to come back. I mean, I am interested to see like how he does stuff Munoz takedowns. Because like the only really grapple heavy fight that he's been in besides that, from what I saw, was held. But man, like on the feet, Nasrat, he's so good. Like the way he beat DeCasey was just like, it was that was fun to watch. But like at this point, like I'm not in the ballpark of like laying the -2, what is he, -245 on Nasrat here, like at all. Like I just, there's no reason to lay juice. Like there's just too many unknowns about Munoz here. Like he could have fantastic cardio and just grind this dude. Like he could. We don't know. So I'm excited to sit back and watch it. Like if I see him like landing a takedown and getting some significant top time here, like I'll probably stab him live. Like I think that really is the the play here. Like if you like Munoz and you like his tape, like go take a stab on his ML line. But for me, I'm just gonna sit back and I'm gonna live bet it.
Yeah, fair. We move on to the welterweight division. Pretty fun fight here. Tim the Dirty Bird Means taking on Laureano Stiropoli. Stiropoli is currently the favorite, although that line's coming in, sitting at -135. Luke, I know you've been playing this fight. What do you got?
Yep. So I played the under 2.5 here for 1.5 units. Ultimately, this is just one of those fights where, I think any sort of better or longtime MMA fan is like, oh, we got a +120 next to Tim Means. I really want to play it. And don't get it twisted. I'm not shitting on anybody who said that, because as soon as I saw that, I thought the exact same thing too. Fair. But really, after watching the tape, it's just like, I mean, we touched on this in the group chat, John, for a couple weeks now. I don't like how Tim Means is reacting to shots in his past couple fights. And honestly, even in Tim's defense, I don't think he's looked bad in really any of those fights. Like overall, like he's actually been, I don't want to necessarily say outstriking guys, but I mean, he's doing typical Tim Means stuff. He's going forward. He's landing in high volume. He's pumping out the jab, the nice 1-2 counter hooks. But he's fighting this guy in Stiropoli, in my opinion, who's just a little bit of a question mark. So definitely a reason why I can't back him straight, because I've seen like earlier in terms of Stiropoli's career that he's been a lot more aggressive, but then also more recently, I've seen him be a little bit more passive and kind of play that outside game. I don't really know too much about his grappling and his jiu-jitsu credentials, but the guy's going to come forward. He's going to really throw pretty much everything into every one of those shots when he is coming forward. And so really, in terms of why I made this bet is twofold, because I do have questions in terms of how both guys approach it, but because I have questions in terms of how both guys approach it, I still think it fits kind of my under narrative here. It's that, so if Tim Means does typical Tim Means things and comes forward, I think he also leaves himself open to be caught, as we saw in the Daniel Rodriguez fight, as we saw in the Nico Price fight. He's going to come forward, and even if he gets tagged, he's still that guy who's not going to come back and reset. He's going to keep going forward. He's just going to rely on his chin to continue to eat those shots. I'm going to win on pressure. I'm going to win on my volume. If the strike presents itself, it presents itself. If I can work my takedowns, I can. But then in Stiropoli, like I said, it's another bit of a question mark, because he's went for it and put a bunch of pressure. And I think in Stiropoli doing that, is actually a good path to victory for him, but that also opens up the counter shots of Tim Means, whose striking is extremely accurate, who has kind of that sneaky KO power too. So it's one of those situations where honestly, I really don't know how the fight's going to play out. So I don't want to back aside, but what I do know in pretty decent confidence is that I think this is going to be a very high volume, high action fight where both guys are going to be throwing pretty heavy. And because of the grappling of Stiropoli, still a little bit of a question mark. You know, Tim Means has some sneaky, decent wrestling and some sneaky, decent jiu-jitsu. We haven't seen it a ton, but it's there. So if Stiropoli makes some mistakes and overextends or something, and Tim Means is able to grab his back from the clinch, land a nice trip there, you know, just jump on him. I think a Tim Means sub is actually somewhat possible in this fight too. So in terms of betting unders, I try to at least check 2 boxes. And this one, I think there's 3 boxes checked. I think a Stiropoli KO is live. I think a Means KO is live. And I think a sneaky little Means sub is live too. So I don't want to say I was surprised about the price, but I think it's one of these kind of sneaky good plays for the card, assuming we don't see like a staring contest. But how often have we really seen that from both guys? So I'm willing to take that nice dog number.
Yeah, don't hate it. Quinn, how about you?
I personally like Tim Means here. I'm not playing him at all because I can't trust the guy's durability at all. Like the guy has really no chin. The guy is susceptible to the body. He's been in so many wars. And you know, Stiropoli, like he swings bombs when he throws those hooks. Like he does have power in his hands. But yeah, I like what I've seen from Tim Means in his last few fights, as in like he's definitely leaned towards his grappling more. Like he's definitely been landing like takedowns his last 4 fights. And when Stiropoli fought Salikov was actually having some success wrestling him here. And Salikov's like not really like a super great wrestler. Like he's definitely more of a striker. So I do think that Tim Means can use that. And I also think that when Stiropoli was fighting Alves, when Alves was having success, he was walking Stiropoli down and getting inside and landing on him. And I really do think that and that's like all Tim Means' game. Like he is all forward pressure. So so for Tim Means to have success here, like he needs to disrupt Stiropoli's rhythm. He needs to like walk him down. And personally, I think Means is like the way better inside boxer than Stiropoli. Like Stiropoli really needs like range to land his shots. So yeah, like I definitely really do like that under 2.5 play. I had actually thought about playing it earlier in the week, and you know, like no one's really talked about with Stiropoli. You know, he got hurt by Alves, and he also got wobbled by Salikov too. So I kind of question his durability, just like I question Tim Means's. But yeah, I don't know. Like it's dog or pass here for sure. But I just personally just cannot trust Tim Means' durability like at all. But I definitely I really do like that play, Luke. The under or the fight doesn't go to decision is nice too. I know I think Lags got in on that at minus 118, I think. So yeah, I do favor Tim Means here, and I do like the under, but yeah, there's no play for me.
Yeah, so I haven't made a play on this yet. God, I'm like strongly thinking about playing Tim Means, to be honest. It's the thing is, like Luke, like you kind of touched on it a bit, like his reactions are they just even when he's not getting hurt, like, you know, he just reacts so poorly to shots from an optics perspective. Like he'll rock his head back, just like stuff that like plays to the judges, and that's kind of like that scares me more than a potential Stiropoli KO, because, you know, Stiropoli will throw in moderate volumes so that maybe that could swing around. I actually don't think Stiropoli has that much power, if I'm being completely honest. You know, he had 7 regional KOs, but the Argentinian regional scene, like, I can't really treat that seriously. Like, he hasn't really hurt anybody on the feet in the UFC. I mean, he went to absolute war with Hector Aldana. I just look at it and I'm like, Means is an inch taller. He's got a 4-inch reach advantage. He's a far more efficient striker. He's a far more accurate striker. He's just a much more well-rounded fighter in general. He has grappling upside. You know, he's probably going to outvolume him. And I just, like, I feel like I should play Means here. Like a year and a half ago, Means is probably minus like 230 in this spot, honestly.
Yeah.
But now we get the Rodriguez fight. And what was the fight before that? Nico Price and Rodriguez happened, and now we're here. But I just don't like Daniel Rodriguez is not bad, man. And like,
not bad at all.
No, and like Nico's got insane power. It's like I don't know. I do think he's starting to wear the damage a bit, but I don't really take that much from him getting knocked out by those guys. And so it's like I'm leaning. I'm probably going to bet Tim Means. I'm just going to be honest. I'm probably going to bet Tim Means.
I think under 2.5, or the fight doesn't go to decision.
I honestly
play if you're going to play it.
I honestly just like unless Means is totally shot, it's going to be so hard for him to lose minutes here. So yeah. I mean, I honestly just think Means is just a better fighter. It's just really the question comes down here: is his durability completely gone or not? If it is, or maybe Stiropoli can keep the volume close enough that Means' reactions will give him rounds. I just don't see how Stiropoli's a better striker though, and it's just a long way of saying I think Means is way better and is probably going to win this fight. Anyway, we move on to whatever. Kevin Holland versus Joe. What, Quinn?
Nothing.
Versus Joaquin Buckley. I don't have much of a lean here. I looked into it a bit. I think the line's wide. Buckley just fought, I believe it was Jackie Gosh in LFA about a week ago. He's an okay striker. He has a lot of power. That's really all he brings to the table, though. Not much of a grappler at all. He throws in good volume. He seems to have okay cardio for a guy as muscle strapped as him. Although, again, someone that muscle strapped, I'm a bit skeptical that holds up if it goes 3 rounds. The big problem for him, as I see it here, is first of all, cutting weight again in that short period of time is not a great thing. Second of all, he's giving away, I think, 5 inches of reach and 5 inches in height. That's a bad thing. And so to compound that, he's a really bad grappler. He's bad takedown defense. And he's really bad off his back. And on the other side, you have Holland, who's massive, is a pretty good grappler. It's like, so he has, if Holland comes out here and just attempts, 5 to 7 takedowns, he's probably going to look his price here at minus 440, to be honest. The real question with Holland is Holland going to get himself do Kevin Holland things and get lured into a brawl with a guy who hits harder and could potentially knock him out? I'm guessing not, but, you never really know. I also think there's a path to victory for Holland where he can just literally stay at the outside and just front kick him for 15 minutes pretty easily. So, yeah, it's no play for me. I think Holland should win this pretty easy. I just don't really trust him. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. I think this is Kevin Holland's fight to lose. If the best Kevin Holland shows up and Kevin Holland executes on pretty much whatever game plan I think he wants, like you touched on, John, I think he can probably just stay at range for 15 minutes and win this fight. But I really think his path to victory here, or his best path to victory, would be in the wrestling grappling. I know we haven't seen a ton of wrestling from Kevin Holland historically, but his jiu-jitsu is solid, and this Buckley guy really can't stuff a takedown at all and gets his guard passed with absolute ease. Like, guys just take him down, step over, mount, easy. Like, he really, his grappling is just really bad. So assuming Kevin Holland has some fight IQ here, he should go grapple heavy here, and I think he should roll pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, if he tries to get into these big pocket exchanges, kind of as you touched on, John, I mean, this Buckley dude does have some power. So if he tries to go that stupid route and do that, we could be seeing a massive upset here. You never know, but I don't think so. I did have a bet on Kevin Holland in the last matchup last week. I think right now we're seeing a smarter Kevin Holland. I think his mindset's in a little bit better a place, and I kind of think we see the ascent of Kevin Holland here coming up. So we'll see.
Kevin Holland is your boy, Luke.
I love Kevin Holland.
Quinn, what about you? Any opinion here?
Yeah, I mean, if Holland stays on the feet with Buckley, like I do think he's gonna beat him there, but he's playing with fire. I mean, Buckley is aggressive. He's explosive. He's got power in his hands. and like he can't grapple at all. Like against Logan Storley, Logan like fucked him up for 3 rounds in the wrestling, like bad, like passed his guard with ease, mounted him, was controlling him on the mat, ended up landing some pretty solid ground and pound on him. I mean, Buckley like really had nothing for him. And then against Vinius, I think the guy last name is De Jesus. I mean, the same thing. Like the guy took him down, and he was controlling him on the mat pretty significantly for the first round. And it just doesn't really seem like Buckley has made those grappling improvements. I mean, when he did take him down, like he doesn't even have a half guard. He doesn't hold a half guard. He just leaves it open. So it's there. It's just there to be passed like easily. And he's been mounted like 3 times that I saw in the regional scenes. Like that's just not what you really want to see when you're fighting Holland. I mean, Holland's a pretty damn good grappler. Like his top pressure passing game is solid, like very, very good. So like I do think he kind of just ragdolls him on the mat here and gets a sub. But yeah, I just like we all know about Kevin Holland. Like like how can you feel confident laying that type of cash down on him at the land that he's at until I see some more fight IQ improvements from him. Besides one fight, I still just really can't back him. But yeah, he really should roll here. I mean, he's just a much better overall mixed martial artist. So I think Holland's probably gonna sub him or pound him out on the mat.
Yeah, no disagreement here. We move on to a fun fight and one where I do have a play. We got Beneil Dariush, Scott Holtzman. Dariush, money is coming in on him, which is surprising to me. He's currently sitting -175 and Holtzman's at +155. So I actually played Holtzman for 2 units at +145. I also played a bit of Holtzman KO round 1 and Holtzman ITD as well. I pretty much – so I'm not trying to offend anybody when I say this, but some people take technique way too freaking seriously, to be honest. Like, look, if Dariush had the same level of output, cardio, and durability as Scott Holtzman, yes, he would wash Scott Holtzman out. Like, of that, I have like very little doubt. And in terms of raw technical fighting, Dariush is better than Holtzman. The problem is that that's not really the case. And like things like physicality, cardio, durability, output matter as much, if not more, in some instances as technique. And to me, this is one of those spots. Like you look at Dariush, he's a solid-ish striker. Like I wouldn't say great, but he's solid. But he's not very durable. Like you're seeing him get hurt virtually every fight these days. He also doesn't have the best cardio, and when he has to grapple heavy, which he's done more and more these days because of that fading durability, he tends to gas out. On the other side, you have Holtzman, who's a tank, is super durable, super good cardio, and basically will constantly fight at a blistering pace. He may give away a round earlier like he did against Jim Miller, but he basically will not get out of your face. He'll stay on top of you pretty much for 15 minutes. He also throws a better output than Dariush, and he hits a lot harder. And so it's like, I do think standing Dariush can win exchanges here for sure, but I don't think he can keep up with the pace on the feet that Holtzman's going to set. I also think, similar to the Means fight, except in this case, we have a guy in Holtzman who will probably surpass him in output. His reactions, even if he doesn't get finished, aren't going to be very good to what Holtzman's throwing at him. I think he's going to visibly slow as this fight goes on. And yeah, so I favor Holtzman on the feet, even if he doesn't KO him, though I do expect he will finish him if it stays there. And so the question becomes, like, can Dariush grind him out on the ground or submit him? I don't think he can grind him out on the ground, to be honest. I'm actually very confident he can't do that, at least not from like guard. Like Holtzman is not going to accept bottom position. He's going to rocket back up as soon as he gets taken down, which is a good tendency. The unfortunate thing is he gives his back to do it. And obviously Dariush is a great back taker. The thing is, Holtzman does a great job of turning and fighting hands as he gets up. Like if you actually look, he's fought Alan Patrick and Jim Miller, who are both pretty high-level black belts as well. In the case of Miller, he's probably a better wrestler than Dariush, and he's probably got a quicker back take. And he was able to kind of explode out before either of them could get his back in both of those instances. He's also, for his career, only allowed about 0.25 passes per 15. And so it's like, first of all, I don't think Dariush has the gas tank to do what Lenz did and attempt 10 to 15 takedowns. I think he's got to kind of have to maximize his takedowns here. And so it's like, look, he could get hooks in on him where Patrick and Miller failed. Like that's definitely possible, and he could sub him. but I don't think it's a particularly likely outcome. Like if he lands 2 takedowns, maybe he gets his back once, but Holtzman's pretty good at jiu-jitsu. It's not a lock that he subs him. And so, like, I mean, he could, but Holtzman could fight out of it. And so, like, ultimately, I guess what I'm saying is, Dariush's best path here is getting Holtzman down, getting his back and submitting him there, or riding him out for multiple rounds on the ground. I just don't think Holtzman's easy to ride out on the ground, and I don't think Dariush being able to just hop onto his back, get hooks, and like he did to Camacho, who's very slow getting up, is going to be as easy against Holtzman, who's got famously strong defensive grappling. So personally, the way I see it is, Dariush is a more well-rounded fighter, a more technical fighter. But basically, if you built a guy in a lab to destroy Beneil Dariush, he would look something like Scott Holtzman. So yeah, I have 2 units on Holtzman plus 145. I'm a bit surprised this line's getting wider, but it seems like I'm in the minority this week. Luke, what do you got here?
Yeah, so no play for me. Definitely don't hate the play, John. Dariush, I guess, is just a little bit of an interesting case study. I don't want to say that he's necessarily undervalued per se, but I just think, at least in this particular matchup, in terms of the striking, I think Holtzman has the better technical boxing, but I also think with like the orthodox southpaw nature, I think that body kick of Dariush is going to be there pretty consistently. I also think that straight left hand is going to be there pretty consistently. It's really, to me, this fight really comes down to how Dariush approaches it, because we've seen, unfortunately for Dariush, at certain points, he kind of gets into these firefights when I really don't think he needs to. And that's really what's got him hurt. So at least from a handicapping perspective and a betting perspective, I don't hate the play there, John, because if he tries to do that with Scott Holtzman, I'm going to favor Scott Holtzman in that firefight a pretty decent amount of the time. But I think, if Dariush does fight smart and kind of avoid those big brawls, I do think he's going to be able to wear on Scott Holtzman in the clinch. I do think the back will present itself at some point. And I do think Beneil will take it. You touch on, Jim Miller, black belt, Alain Patrick, black belt. Real quick sidebar. I do think the Patrick fight was a super impressive performance from Scott Holtzman, though. Like, I know Patrick's kind of like a really weird guy, but like at that point, Patrick was 15-1. His only loss was to Marbek Taisimov. I think Patrick was like a minus 250 in that spot or whatever, just a really funky guy to fight. And Holtzman put on like a crazy performance. And then obviously against Lentz, I guess if you're scoring that fight in terms of damage, definitely given the nod to Holtzman there, but Lentz kind of squeaked it out. And then, Maz just kind of a guy who's going to go back and forth with you. Holtzman kind of won that brawling exchange, and, we saw Miller steal around from him, but, Holtzman got the better of him as Miller's tended to fade late. I don't know. It's just kind of, I know he lost to Josh Emmett, Drew Dober back in the day. I just think this is kind of one of the more tricky stylistic matchups for Scott Holtzman. And I don't necessarily think he runs through a guy like Beneil Dariush unless he sparks him early, but I don't know. I think a little bit of the vet savvy. I know Holtzman's like 36 too, but I just think the more battle tested guy in Dariush comes through here. But from a betting perspective, it's definitely a dogger pass.
Quinn, how about you?
Yeah, so I grabbed a little bit of Holtzman by KO at plus 600. He was sitting at plus 400 on every other book, so I saw some value there. I just don't really trust Dariush's durability at all. He got hurt by Clausy. Like who gets hurt by Clausy? Like he was doing the chicken dance and then walked him down and knocked him out. Like that was a fantastic performance by Dariush. That was awesome. But like that's just not against a guy like Holtzman. That's really not like what you want to see here. I mean, I think Holtzman is probably like one of the hardest hitters that Dariush has faced in the last like 5 fights. So yeah, like I personally think that like Dariush has to have like some pretty significant top time here, like in order for him to win this fight. Like I do think he could like win on the feet, but I just don't think that it's a good idea for him to stay on the feet with Holtzman here for like an extended period of time. Like I just really think that Holtzman is gonna like find that chin and really test it. I don't know. I love Dariush. I think he's a fantastic fighter. I do think he is the overall more skilled fighter, but he's been in so many wars and like his chin is it's just not what it was. Like he gets rocked in every single one of his fights. So I do think that Holtzman is going to be able to take advantage of that. And like you touched on, John, like Dariush's cardio is not that great. So like, can he wrestle like consistently like for 3 rounds? Like I don't think he can. Like Holtzman is going to make him work on the mat. Like he's going to make him work. And I just personally don't really see Dariush surviving here like with that. So personally, like I think you could play the inside the distance or the under, but I definitely saw value in the plus 600 Holtzman KO prop. So I had no problem laying a little laying a tiny play on that. But I don't really hate either side. Like if you were to tell me you were going to play Dariush, I definitely wouldn't hate that bet. If you are going to take Holtzman like ML, I don't hate that bet either. So it's going to be a really good fight. I think it's a good spot for Holtzman to come through, and then he's gonna get another really solid test. Like Dariush is a pretty solid gatekeeper. I mean, if you get, aside from Alexander Hernandez, if you get past Dariush, I mean, you're gonna get some pretty solid matchups here. So yeah, I do think that Holtzman is gonna get it done. But would it surprise me if Dariush grinded him out or subbed him? Like no, it wouldn't. So yeah, it's a solid fight, but I'm definitely gonna pick Holtzman by probably a 2nd or 3rd round knockout.
Yeah, winner of this fight's probably gonna be ranked, to be honest.
Yeah.
But anyway, we move on to this is the only fight on the card I haven't taped, to be honest. It's Yana Kunitskaya, Julia Stoliarenko. I've seen a lot of takes, listened to a lot of pods on it. I want no part of this fight. So Luke, do you have any analysis here for us?
Yeah, so I actually did a pretty deep dive into this one, and unfortunately, I came out with absolutely nothing. Man, it's a bummer. You guys know I love my WMMA hashtag. Yep. Shout out Sun Tzu, but no. So really, this is a really intriguing fight though, because I think Yana Kunitskaya is definitely going to be the better striker here. She comes from a Taekwondo Muay Thai base. Whatever. She's going to throw a lot of kicks, throw in decent volume. She is a little bit hittable. That's definitely the case. She got her nose busted pretty bad against Marion Renault. But on Stoliarenko, she's a pretty tough girl as well. Like she's going to sit there and take her licks, but she's going to give it back. But the problem with Stoliarenko is she's going to kind of accept that back foot and play the outside. And I talk about this all the time in low to moderate level WMMA, and not to throw shade at any of these chicks, but it just is what it is. It's volume, pressure, output, and aggression, is what really wins fights, unless there's a significant core competency in terms of power or grappling, and which is what throws a really interesting wrinkle into this fight. So what I'm getting to is Yana being a girl who really works really well out of the clinch and has gone there consistently. I'm assuming she goes there again, and if she does, Stoliarenko is just a notorious guard jumper, guard puller for days. She doesn't really have much offensive wrestling, pretty much at all. So if Yana, in my opinion, shows bad fight IQ and actually goes to the clinch, even though it being her best core competency, it's actually giving Julia her best opportunity and a potential path to victory here. Because I think she jumps guard. So really the question is can Yana posture out of that and stand up and back away? Because if she follows Julia down, Julia has excellent dexterity on the ground. She's a BJJ brown belt. She gets to these arm bar positions with just consistently. Her hips just move. They move and they move and they move and they move. She goes. The problem is she's kind of a one-trick pony in that too, where she's gotten a lot of these arm bars. I think like 8 of her, or I think it's like 7 of her 9 wins her by arm bar or something like that, something crazy. But really, that's all she's got. But at the same time, she's very, very good with it. So if she is able to get there, we've seen Yana armbarred before by what's her name back in Invicta, strong wrestler. I'm blanking on it right now. The girl who Cyborg killed, Tanya Evinger armbarred her back in Invicta a second ago too. But so it's really just, it's a funky fight where it's really hinged on how smart does Yana fight here. because if she doesn't fight smart, I think she's going to give Yulia her best chance to win, because I just don't see, even with Yana actually having really, really poor takedown defense, the entries of Julia's wrestling in space are really, really bad. So I actually think Yana stuffs takedowns in space, but really the question is, if it is just, does she follow her to the ground? Because if this fight is standing for 15 minutes, I think Yana beats her up actually pretty bad. I'm sure she's going to eat some shots as she did, but she's one of those high output girls who's going to be much longer here, much taller too. So I like Yana to win, but it's one of those fights I do not advocate a bet on Yana at this price. And if you're betting Yulia, I think it's a bit of a dart throw, because I really think her only path to victory here is via sub. So, I mean, if you want to take a throw or a stab on something, it's definitely probably on Yulia by sub, but this is the fight I want no part of.
Yeah, agreed. Quinn, you have anything here?
Pass.
Yes, nice. We can move on. All right, Maki Patolo, Darren Stewart. Quinn, what do you got? I know you have a bet here.
Yeah, so I have 1.5 units on Stewart. I think I got him at minus 135. Breakdown short here. I just really don't like Mackie Tits. I don't think that he's that good on the feet. I don't think he's that technical. I think the power in his hands is pretty overrated. I don't really like the level of opponents that he's fought. I have faded him in pretty much every single one of his fights. I think his wrestling is pretty overrated. I don't really like his top control. A lot of people are saying that the move up to 185 is going to be good for him. Like maybe so, but I think he's pretty undersized here, and I'm not in the business of putting money down on anyone that gets their ass beat by Callan Potter. That was, in my opinion, that was a pretty bad loss for Mackie. I mean, that was like the only fight that I was like contemplating actually betting him in, and then Potter comes out and just looks like, looks better than any tape that you watched on that guy regionally. Stewart, there's some reservations, like you touched on some good points in the group chat, John, about how he can kind of give away minutes here, but he is like the much better technical striker. He hits way harder than Mackie. In the clinch, he's so much better in the clinch than Mackie. Like I think he's really going to have a lot of success in the clinch, landing his knees and elbows. And I think he's kind of an underrated wrestler. Like he's definitely landed takedowns in the past. I don't have the stats pulled up here, but I do think that he can have some success here with his wrestling as well. I just think that Stewart is the much better MMA fighter, and I think a lot of people are taking recency bias from the Bartosz Fabinski loss. And like Fabinski, he does that to people. He's a really hard guy to like beat if you don't have like good get-ups. He takes you down at will. He has solid cardio. He locks on that figure four and grabs your wrist, and you're really not going anywhere. I really. And with the whole COVID thing, they weren't really training, so I don't really know how motivated Stewart was. Like he just didn't really look like he wanted to even be in there in that fight at all. And Stewart really only loses to like good grapplers. He's he made. Well, yeah, yeah. Okay. That wasn't a great loss, but that was what, like 4 years ago. I mean, he's definitely
I know.
He's definitely made some improvements, in his fundamental game. But the level of competition, that he's faced is so much higher than Mackie's. Like Mackie's literally faced like the bottom of the barrel. I even did I have a play on Charles Bird? I'm pretty sure I did. That just stung really bad. But yeah, I just don't really think that Mackie is UFC level here, like at all. I really don't. And I really. I think he's going to have to consistently wrestle here. I don't think he's going to be able to win striking exchanges on the feet. And I don't trust his gas tank to be able to wrestle Stewart. Stewart's big. He's got a lot of strength and he's solid in the clinch. So I struggle to find a good path to victory for Mackie other than consistently landing more volume here. And I just think that Stewart can clinch up and mix in his wrestling to really negate that here. So I got in on Stewart at minus 135, and then it got steamed all the way up to minus 190, and now it's back down to minus 165, which is kind of where I think it should be here. I just really don't think that Mackie should be here, and I think he'll probably get his pink slip after this. So I think Stewart rules here.
Yeah. So look, I knew I generally thought before taping it that I was going to love Stewart here. I knew the general consensus, both on Twitter and elsewhere, is that Maki's terrible and Stewart's probably a bit underrated. And so I picked up a lot of the early minus 130 on Stewart without taping at all, just because I sort of knew the line was going to blow up, and if I wanted out of it, I could get out of it pretty easily. So I taped it finally, and look, I think Stewart's going to win the fight, but I ended up hedging off my entire play because, I looked at it. It's look, he's technically the more sound fighter here. He's got more power. He's more durable. He's more athletic. All of that is true. The problem is, and Quinn, you touched on it, I brought it up. It's if you actually look at his career, he hasn't really been able to seriously get out ahead in volume against anybody except Wynn. And that's because Darren Wynn was diving for legs for 15 minutes in that fight and not even really looking to strike too much. And you look at some of these fights, and a lot of these victories that looked real nice at the time, like Charles Byrd, Bevon Lewis, Darren Wynn, look a lot worse in hindsight. Look, like I said, I think he's the better fighter. The problem is he doesn't throw enough. If you told me Stewart was going to come out and wrestle for 15 minutes to take Maki down, I'd have a lot more confidence in him. The problem is we've only seen him do that once, and it was against Julian Marquez, and he gassed out halfway through the second and got submitted. And so I look at it, I'm yeah, he should win this fight. He's the better fighter. The thing is, Patolo, the one thing you can rely on him to do is just pump volume all day. And so it's ultimately I don't really want to be in a position where I have to rely on Stewart to either keep up with volume or get a KO. Now, I do think he can get a KO. Patolo's chin is garbage. He got knocked out by Cassius Kane, who I really don't rate at all. He's been knocked out a couple times recently, but KOs also are kind of random in nature. He didn't KO Bevon Lewis, who's not super durable. He couldn't KO Darren Wynn, who again hasn't really looked super durable. And so it's I don't know. I think the line is pretty much around where it should be. Right now it's sitting, I think it's minus 145 on 5 dimes at the moment. I think that's about where it should be. I just don't have – I don't know. I don't have the confidence that I thought I'd have in Stewart, to be honest with you. I think he wins this fight, but I just don't – I need to see him put together a performance where he really overcomes some of these issues, these volume issues, and puts together a complete fight. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, so no side for me, but this rounds out my bets of the night. I played the under 2.5 rounds at minus 112. I got on this one pretty early. I don't even know where it sits at now. But largely my reasoning is, and just kind of some of the points you touched on, John, that I want to not disagree with, but counter just a tad in terms of Stewart. If you look at in terms of the guys that he's fighting and how they've been fighting him, one, they're either wrestling him to death or they're just non-committal. Yeah, and so in this particular matchup, we could see Maki Patolo go super grapple heavy, but one, I don't rate his wrestling or grappling very strong. And I think Darren Stewart's actually much, much stronger here. And I know it might be a bit of a leap of faith because we've seen Darren Stewart get out wrestled and stuck on the cage, with pretty much consistency throughout the course of his UFC career. But I don't think Maki Patolo is a guy who's going to do that. He doesn't have a strong wrestling background. I believe he's a white belt on paper too, in terms of his jiu-jitsu. So ultimately, Maki's just not a guy I see who has the best fight IQ in the world. So largely, I just see this being a pocket brawl between the two at certain points. So I think one guy's going to fall here at some point. Whether I think Stewart knocks him out, to be honest, but we've seen Stewart's chin checked at times a little bit. He hasn't been knocked out, but we've seen him hurt pretty bad. I don't know if it was. I think it was the Byrd fight where he got hurt pretty bad at the end of the first round, right at the bell. But ultimately, it's one of these fights where I just see a lot of action unless we just get one of these uncharacteristic staring contests between two guys who like to throw down. Like I said, I know. What's that?
And Maki's going to go forward and throw. That's pretty.
Well, that's what I mean. In terms of Stewart, because getting back to it real quick, just based on the guys in how they fought him, it really hasn't given Darren Stewart what Darren Stewart needs to do to succeed. Where a guy in Maki Patolo is going to do everything, at least what I'm assuming, to give Darren Stewart to do what he needs to succeed, assuming Maki Patolo fights similarly how he has in the past. So I think the under 2.5 at near pick'em odds has a crazy amount of value unless we see something completely different than from what we've seen these guys on tape. And real quick note too, Mr. Stewart just got his purple belt too. So
good for him.
So,
Nice.
you know, I know he struggled in the wrestling and grappling before, but I've also seen Maki Patolo get in a lot of dominant positions and also get reversed a lot. So it might be a hot take, but I'm not counting out of the question. You know, if Maki goes wrestle heavy in this fight, Darren being able to reverse position, get in dominant position on top, Maki gives his back and Darren takes his back and submits him. I know it might be a bit of a hot take, but I don't think that's absolutely out of the question either. So to me, at least 2 to 3 boxes are checked for the under 2.5. I think we see a high action. What's that?
I think Darren's a better grappler.
I agree too. We haven't seen it. We haven't seen it much, but I would agree. So I think all the boxes are checked for an under 2.5. I like the violence bet.
Yeah, don't hate it. We move to the co-main. We got Chris, the All-American Weidman, taking on Omari Akhmedov. Weidman currently sitting -140, Akhmedov +120. Quinn, you have a play here. What do you got?
Yeah, so I have 2 units on Weidman at -123, and I'm kind of kicking myself for like not playing him when he dropped to like -105 at one point on my book. Like we had talked about it like earlier in the week. I mean, like I just think these odds on Weidman are like pretty disrespectful. I mean, I don't see any way that Omari. I don't see there's any way that Omari is better than him in any aspect of MMA. Like on the feet, like Weidman is just gonna style on him. He's gonna absolutely style him on the feet. Like it's not even gonna be close. Like his striking is so much better than Omari's, and like in the clinch and the grappling, like Weidman is just like he's an All-American wrestler. Like he's solid everywhere. Like he's you know he's so much better, here. You know, and like before his last fight, Omari was not even ranked, and he was fighting like unranked fighters that Weidman would absolutely kill, you know. So like this, like, you know, the UFC, they're giving him a solid fight here to get back in it. Like I just think that these odds on him are extremely disrespectful. You know, and Omari, you know, he hasn't had a KO in 6 years. Like he hasn't knocked anyone out in 6 years. And people are like, oh, the move up to 185 is good for him. Like he looks better. Like, yeah, he looks better, but like he's definitely going to be undersized here. Like Weidman's going to be significantly bigger. And, you know, like, and Omari, like there's a huge red flags on this guy's gas tank. He has like 7 minutes of gas and that's it. And then he slows really, really bad, you know, and like when Weidman is losing these fights, he's winning, he's dominating these fights until the 3rd round. And then he's getting clipped and finished. I mean, and I just don't really see like, I just don't think Omari has the gas tank to do that at all. I think, like, I don't know. I just think that these odds on him are just crazy and just disrespectful. Like you know, like C has touched on like all week about like the people that Weidman has been getting knocked out by. Most people would get knocked out by those guys. Like those guys all hit hard. Weidman has been fighting the best fighters in the world. So like I don't knock him for any of that. I just, you know, like comparing like Reyes and Jacare and all of his Rockhold, all his previous opponents, like those are all like ex-world champions, like just fantastic fighters. And like, you know, and Weidman was roughly like winning most of those fights until he's getting clipped and getting knocked out. And so I just don't understand it. Like he's probably going to look like a -3, -400 favorite here. Like I really don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. So I had no problem putting 2 units on him there. I kind of hope that like maybe late money comes in on Omari because everyone on Twitter is just most people are just, from what I'm seeing, just love Omari here. They just don't trust Weidman's chin, and I would love to get a better price on him and put a little bit more on him. I also think that you could play a round 3 prop here if you want with Weidman. I'm probably going to stay away from that just because I have the 2 units on him already. But I just, for like the odds, I just think it's pretty disrespectful for all that Weidman has accomplished here for him to open up as a pick'em with Omari Akhmedov.
Yeah, so I'm also on Weidman. I have 2.5 units on him, minus 108. Some similar thoughts. So, like, pretty much my thinking is if this fight happened, let's say mid 2017, Weidman would probably be like a minus 300 favorite here. Now, look, there are real chin concerns. I'm not ready to say, obviously, like we've talked with C a lot this week. I'm not going to go as far as say he doesn't have a chin issue. He's been knocked out in 5 of 6 fights. I think to say he doesn't have a chin issue is being a bit naive. But what I will say is, like, you have to contextualize a lot of this. So, like, Luke Rockhold just basically beats the fucking brakes off him. And, like, that's peak Rockhold, who was an absolute monster. Next fight, Yoel Romero. Late there, early round 3, I think Weidman was up on the cards in that fight when he gets knocked out. He gets knocked out by a flying knee. Probably would have knocked anybody out. Next fight, Mousasi. He's basically grinding Mousasi out, puts his hand down because he thinks or he reacts weirdly to a knee because he thought it was illegal, and they stopped the fight. It was really controversial at the time, but he didn't really look that hurt after it. But so he loses that fight, KO. Next fight, Kelvin Gastelum. Gastelum drops him in the first round here, but outside of that, Weidman just absolutely eats him alive in the grappling and eventually submits him. Next fight, this is now November 2018, Jacare. This is a pretty awesome fight. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you go watch it.
Great fight.
Weidman and him go to absolute war. Weidman's up 2-0 on every card, gets knocked out by an absolute howitzer late round 3. Now, we're talking about chin issues. Weidman eats 42 head strikes in this fight. Literally never looks injured or hurt at any point over the course of the first 12 minutes of this fight before the shot that puts him out. So again, it's kind of, I'm not saying his chin's is good, but again, he was eating a ton of damage that fight and was wearing it fine. Next fight, he goes up to light heavyweight, fights Dominic Reyes. Reyes is one of the heaviest hitters in the UFC, pound for pound. Frankly, he should have never gone to light heavyweight and gets knocked out there. That one was a bit more concerning for me because I didn't think Reyes' left straight was particularly hard. But again, it's a 205. And so, look, yeah, the chin is concerning. It is. But we haven't yet reached the Jake Ellenberger, Ben Saunders stage of his career. Where Ben Saunders against Matt Brown blocks a head kick and somehow winds up on wobbly legs. Like that's we're not quite there yet from what we've seen. And, in terms of his performance outside of the knockouts, it's actually pretty good. Like, you look at the fight with Reyes, he's up a division at light heavyweight. If we learned anything from Reyes, that Reyes, especially in the Jones fight, has really elite takedown defense. And that fight starts off and he takes Reyes down like it's nothing right off the bat. Ragdolls Gastelum. He took Jacare down. He was ragdolling Mousasi. The performance outside of the knockouts really hasn't been bad. And so I look at this fight and it's like, yeah, Omari could knock him out. I'm going into that with eyes open. Maybe the chin is gone, but skill for skill, the striking skill for skill is probably close, except Weidman's 2 inches taller and has like a 6-inch reach advantage. Like, he can probably, if it stayed standing, just keep him on the outside with a jab and win this fight just in the striking. In terms of the grappling, it's not close. Like, I know Omari's a wrestler, but it isn't close at all. If Weidman decides to grapple him and doesn't get clipped coming in, he is going to absolutely dominate this fight. Like, unless he's washed, which I guess could be, but like, we haven't seen much to show his wrestling's gone. I think he's going to absolutely. I think if he gets his hands on him anyway, he's going to dominate this fight. And so basically the way I look at it is I kind of capped it like Weidman minus 186 to minus 200 in that range. Like I said, I think a couple years ago it would have been a lot wider. And I'm fine with it not being that wide just because, there are those question marks. But I don't think the chance of an Akhmedov getting his first knockout in 6 years outweighs the fact that he's outclassed everywhere else that this fight is. So, yeah, I'm on Weidman for 2.5 units. Said if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm willing to be wrong on this, though. Luke, what are your thoughts?
So I haven't played this fight yet. I kind of would probably be on the train with you guys as well. I missed him at kind of those near pick 'em odds, and then everything kind of came in. So I don't really like a bet where it's currently at. But you guys kind of touched a lot on Weidman, so I just want to touch on Akhmedov a little bit in terms of the viewers. He's a guy who fought at 170 a large majority of his career. Since he moved up to 185, he's 3-0-1. You talk about fights you want to go watch. Go back and watch that Omari Akhmedov Marvin Vettori fight. That was a scrap and a half. Those guys threw down. That was a fun fight. If you wanted to give that to either guy, I would have been cool. It was officially scored a draw. I was cool with that too. He beats up Tim Boach, beats up Zach Cummins pretty bad, beats up Ian Heinisch, but Ian Heinisch actually came on late and actually landed some takedowns, and I think stole the third round there as well via wrestling. So my big thing with Akhmedov is, obviously the guy has a V at the end of his name, so he's obviously going to get a little bit more credence than maybe some other guys will. But the really interesting thing in diving deep into him is if you go back, like he's a guy who fought like really reckless early on in his career. And, in the last 3 fights or so, we've seen him fight a little bit more calculated. He'll still throw like pretty much everything into his strikes, but he's not just kind of that bull that he used to be. He's kind of fighting more on the outside, and he actually lands strikes like relatively accurately. I think he almost hits like a 50% clip, not overtly high volume, but is accurate. And as you touched on, he's not a guy who's sitting there knocking anybody out, at least over the course of his UFC career, but the dude does pack a bit of a punch. But so ultimately why I have not bet this yet, obviously given the line, I am on the Weidman side, but I really think what's interesting here is it's in terms of how Omari Akhmedov approaches this fight. Because if Omari Akhmedov, if we see a patient Omari Akhmedov, as you touched on, Weidman's going to have a massive size advantage here in terms of his reach. And I think Weidman's jab is extremely underrated. The dude just pops it out and is very, very accurate. And I think he jabs Omari Akhmedov into absolute oblivion. Omari Akhmedov, he cannot play the outside game with Chris Weidman here. We need, if Omari Akhmedov wants to win this fight, we need to see like 2016 Omari Akhmedov.
I was going to say, I thought you were going towards if he stays patient, he wins. I was going to say, yeah, if he goes, he needs to go crazy here.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting. We need to see I know that's actually where he struggled historically, but in this particular matchup, we need to see a more aggressive Omari Akhmedov to win this fight to potentially check that chin of Chris Weidman, make him work a little bit, see if he can work him in the clinch. I just don't see it though. As you touched on, man, I know Weidman's grappling and wrestling is just so underrated. If you really look at like the dude's about as high level as it gets. Yep. And as you touched on too, like Akhmedov, he's obviously a Dagestani guy, master of sport and combat sambo. So you got that whole narrative too. Like obviously his wrestling's very good, but you talk about levels to this game, man. We've seen Omari Akhmedov actually grind it out earlier in his career too. I know that was at 170, but if we're talking about a guy who's bigger than him, who can actually push a pretty decent pace, I think it kind of smother him on top too. I think Chris Weidman's the man to do it. So really everything to me speaks Chris Weidman, assuming he comes with the correct game plan, doesn't get that chin check. But there's also just that big question mark to me of how Omari Akhmedov approaches this fight, which is ultimately why I'm kind of staying away. Even if it gets closer to pick 'em odds, I'm still going to be kind of hesitant, but I do think Weidman gets back in the W column here.
Yeah, agreed. And so we move to the main event of the evening. We got Alexei Oleinik fighting Derek Lewis here. It's funny. So I did tape on this last week. I played Oleinik at plus 230 for 2 units, thinking, I'm going to be the only one on this. Like everybody's going to see back beast and be on him here. Like this is such a slick play. No one's going to be on it. Turns out everybody was thinking what I'm thinking. He's down to like plus 160 now. To be honest, it makes me deeply uncomfortable how much everybody seems to like, Alexei Oleinik in this spot. That generally doesn't end well. Like Jose Flores didn't end well for me on Tuesday night this week. But pretty much, so the reason I like Oleinik is pretty much because he knows what he's good at, and he'll basically blitz forward into the clinch, look to get you down. The guys he's really struggled with are guys he can't really do that to, like a Walt Harris, a guy who is just athletic enough to kind of like push him off and just nuke him. Those guys give him problems, but you look at like a Mark Hunt, a guy that he was able to get down, finished him. Travis Brown, although Brown had a lot of success early in that fight too. The thing is, for me, it's like I have seen, and like look, obviously we all know, if Lewis can finish him in any engagement at any time, the problem for me is like it's not like Derek Lewis is like some big counterpuncher, and if Olynyk does his thing where he's coming forward, swinging wild hooks into the clinch, that Lewis is going to sit down and throw a pull counter and put him out. What's more likely to happen is Lewis is going to get backed up to the fence and end up in the clinch. And this is kind of really the crux of the analysis for me. Like, I looked pretty deep at Lewis's takedown defense. Now, look, don't get me wrong. Alexei Oleynik's not Daniel Cormier as a wrestler. But DC in that fight wasn't even really trying. Like, he was just grabbing a leg and he was toppling over. He ankle picked him in space at one point and put him down. You look at, again, against Blagoy, same deal. Gets him down with ease. Against Latifi, has him against the fence, puts him down with ease. Now, these may be more credentialed wrestlers, but if you actually look at what happens to Lewis on these, number one, he's in the clinch. He doesn't fight for underhooks at all. As soon as his legs get forced to move laterally, his base basically crumbles and he topples over. It happens every single time. Why he has been able to survive as long as he has is because he basically won't accept position and explodes up and gives his back to get up. And the fortunate thing is most heavyweights aren't flexible or well-trained enough in submission grappling to take his back. Daniel Cormier was, and he ended up submitting him. Alexei Oleinik, if you watch him on people's back, will put hooks in. He will flatten guys out, and he will submit you. And so, like, I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I think unless Lewis nukes him within the first, 30 seconds to a minute of this fight, he's going to end up on his back here. I think if he tries to explode, he's going to probably end up with Olynyk on his back. Now, can he survive that? Yeah, for sure. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if he survives for a round or so. And if he does, maybe Olynyk gasses out and then he just knocks him unconscious, after that. That definitely is in play. But I do just sort of think that, if I thought Lewis was any kind of counterpuncher, I would think he could, put him out coming in, but he's not really. And so, I sort of think as long as Olynyk has gas, he's going to be the one in control of this fight. And, if he gets 6-7 minutes of top time early in this fight, I have to imagine he finds a sub. I mean, if not, he's probably screwed. But to me, just looking at this line, I kind of think, it should be minus 110 aside here. Obviously, Olynyk's 43 with a bad gas tank, and so that's concerning. But I don't see any justification for Lewis being a big favorite at all. But yeah, so I have 2 units on Olynyk plus 230. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. I think it's one of these fights. I think it's kind of binary. I think it's really whoever's able to execute on their core competency. It's does Olynyk close distance, get the clinch, get takedowns and get a sub, or does Derek Lewis nuke him? And so I guess I'm going to go kind of contrarian here. I don't have a bet, but my biggest thing in terms of this fight and why I'm picking Lewis is I've just never really seen Alexei Oleinik close distance effectively ever. He kind of just drops his head and wings big shots. And I know one of the big things, I don't know if this is you, John. I'm not shitting on you. I'm just saying in general. But people reference the Mark Hunt fight. We're like, oh, well, Mark Hunt was this big hitter. How come he didn't knock Olynyk out? Well, I guess the difference here is, to me, is Derek Lewis has like a 7-inch reach advantage. I'm not saying that he uses it particularly well, but he's a much, much bigger guy. And where Hunt was kind of just trying to play that outside leg kick game. And I think Olynyk's literally just going to have to bull rush him at some point. And that's where what happens in this fight. It all comes when they clash. I think honestly, Derek Lewis lands a big uppercut when he drops his hand and he starches him personally. But if he doesn't and he gets to that clinch, maybe I'm actually giving a little bit more credence to Olynyk than you are, John, because I think if Olynyk gets him down, I don't think Lewis is going to be able to buck him off like he's been able to do a lot of guys. I think he actually subs him relatively easily as Lewis just kind of turtles over and gives his back. Olynyk's just got his jiu-jitsu solid. He's not just going to get bucked off like that. I know Lewis is much bigger, but I think the pedigree of Olynyk is so much better there. So I think if this fight does hit the mat, I don't think Lewis survives at all. So it really just comes down to who's able to get off on their game. The only reason I capped Lewis a decent favorite is because every fight starts on the feet. And Olynyk is going to have to close that distance. And once again, I've never seen him.
You're right about that.
I've just never seen him really close it effectively. And Lewis, and from a handicapping and picking and analysis perspective, the guy's just a complete anomaly. You can't handicap Derek Lewis fights like you cap anybody else. The guy's like 14-5 and literally has a right hand. He doesn't have anything else in his game. He's 14-5 in the best company and fighting promotion, the UFC. Like, you just can't handicap Derek Lewis fights. So it's tough for me. I don't hate an Olynyk bet at all. I definitely wouldn't back Derek Lewis straight. I was considering a hedge on Lewis by KO, but that price wasn't great. And then Olynyk by sub, but I didn't really get where I wanted. So I think Lewis nukes him, but from a straight betting perspective, I definitely think the value's on Olynyk, especially if you got him like over plus 200.
Quinn, how about you?
I don't have a play here. I kind of didn't do any tape on it, and I'm just like, I mean, I didn't do any tape on it like when Olynyk was like plus 230, but I definitely think it's dog or pass here. I just don't know if I trust Olynyk's durability like coming in. But man, I also don't trust Lewis on the mat. I mean, he's been taken down and has gotten his guard passed. I think he's like the top. There's some stat that we saw on Twitter. He was like the top 4 in the UFC for like getting his guard passed like 40 times.
Yeah.
Is that real? 40 times?
Yeah, it's pretty horrible, honestly. You know, the guy really has like, the guy has like no jiu-jitsu. He has no fundamentals. Like he's
passed it 8 times.
Yeah. And, you know, like that's just bad, you know, and Olynyk, he's a phenomenal grappler, phenomenal submission artist. Like he has some submissions on his record. Like if you actually go back and you actually watch that, like some subs that you just like really don't see. He's got really, really big hands and, you know, against, you know, really strong grips and against Doom, like he looked really good. Like he looked solid. Like he slimmed down. He was muscular. Like, you know, his cardio was better than really any of his previous fights, in my opinion. Like I didn't really give him a chance in hell to win that fight at all. And he, you know, he did what he needed to what he needed to do in that fight. I don't know. I just don't know if I trust like his durability. I mean, Walt Harris nuked him so quick. Like that was a pretty bad KO, and he's been knocked out quite a few times in his career. But like I can't trust like Lewis on the mat. Like I don't get how you could even bet Lewis as like at his current price right now, like at all. Like, and I don't really see anyone on him here at all. Like no one. So I just
I said that's the concern.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, yeah. So people are seeing what we're seeing, really. You know, it's like it's 100% like dog or pass here. You know, like, but Lewis, you know, he's that type of guy. You know, to like where he's like Luke said, he's an anomaly. Like, you know, like he was getting his fucking ass beat by what was that guy? Volkov. He was getting fucking destroyed. And I had a huge play on Volkov in that fight. I think I had like 3 or 4 units on him there, and then he just fucking like just lands that nuke. You know, so like you can really like you can never ever count Lewis out. Like you just really can't. And like I saw some narrative on Twitter like, oh, Olynyk can't sub Lewis because Lewis has no neck. Hunt has no fucking neck. He has 0 neck, and he subbed him like no problem. So like I don't. What?
I bet Mark Hunt after all that later.
Yeah, I didn't have a play on that fight, but like yes, like I don't really see that narrative at all. And you know, I was like, oh, maybe we'll get like a decent price on the under. No, I think like I was kind of looking at fight starts around 2 at -170, but like that's just a sweat. That's just a huge sweat. Like it really is. I think I threw it in my Lambo.
-170?
I think so. Yeah. No. Yeah. -170, I believe.
What?
Let me look.
I almost like doesn't start 1-2. Like the plus side of that.
Yeah, I would not play that. That is going to be the biggest sweat of 5 minutes of your life if you play that.
Yeah, it's a sweat. I do think I put it in my Lambo. But yeah, I don't really think that there's a solid play here in general. Like it's really dog or pass. It's going to be a fun fight. I'm looking forward to them not getting each other out and it getting into like round 3 or 4 and it just being a complete fucking slop fest. Just an absolute just gassing slop fest. Like I really hope it just comes down to that because that would just fucking crack me up. But yeah, I think it's going to be a good fight. I'd like to see Olynyk win, honestly. Like he's 43 and he's, that'll put him on a 3-fight win streak, and he's just, I love Olynyk. He's awesome. But I also wouldn't mind seeing Lewis win, because his post-fight speeches are extremely entertaining. I love his post-fight speeches, so it's going to be a fun main event. I really think they probably should have made it the co-main and put someone else up in the main, but I definitely don't hate it. It's going to be a fun fight for sure. So,
yeah, agreed. All right, guys. Well, thanks for stopping in this week. And yeah, we will see you next. We've got a big card. We will probably have a special guest on. It's UFC 252, Miocic versus Cormier. I don't think it's the best card for betting. A couple more fights were added today, so hopefully that turns some stuff up here. But we're going to have some fun. We'll have someone on next week with us. So it's going to be a good time. We will notify you about date and time on Twitter. Follow us at Club and Sub. And yeah, thanks for stopping by. As always, I'm John Stargarian. You can find me on Twitter at MMA Fox. It's Luke at SWR_betting and Quinn at Orthodox1993. Anyway, take it easy, guys, and good luck this weekend. Bye-bye.